Welcome to the first ever episode of I Ship It from Most Writers Are Fans. My name is Terry Bartley, and I am joined by my good friend Kirsha Fox. And we're going to be talking about, this whole series is going to be me talking to people about various popular cultures in media, like different kind of couples that people ship together. You may have noticed from the title, today we're going to be talking about Frodo and Sam from The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. So I'll let you sort of take the lead here, Kirsha. What do you feel like they're a couple? Do you feel like there's like fertile ground for this ship that people push?
Well, I can definitely see why people ship them. I myself think that they definitely do love each other. There's a lot of intimacy shown between the two of them. I mean, you get Sam's utter devotion to this other person, which I think is just really kind of beautiful. And I don't think that we see that portrayed in media a lot, like the complete and utter love between two people, and the selflessness that is shown between them. In fact, their arc goes over something of like the ups and downs and even like a breakup and a get together again. It's really, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the thing about this, because it is very like romance book tropey, right? Because of the whole like servant to lover, like that feels like a thing that I'm sure exists in these things. Um, so in the beginning, it does sort of feel like Sam has a devotion to Frodo. Frodo doesn't necessarily feel the same way about Sam, but as the book progresses, I think that we do see that eventually. Like whenever Frodo leaves and Sam is like chasing him, whenever he leaves the Fellowship, and I think that you see Frodo kind of like accept like this is a person that's going to be with me for the long term. You know.
Yeah, in the movies in particular, Sam throws himself in the river of like, you're not leaving without me. I will die rather than let you leave without me.
Which is
It's
probably
a
toxic,
really
but
powerful scene.
yeah, and and I think you're right. I think that there's something about. I think that's going to be a common theme in this show. Is like the truth is, it's rare to see friendships between same-sex people in media that are strictly friendships, right? Like that is very rare in media because they love to make people couples. Um,
hmm
so I think that our instinct to ship Frodo and Sam is the instinct that most writers have, which is like, why aren't they kissing? Like they should be kissing now. Like that's what should be happening now.
Yeah, but as an author, I absolutely love just sort of dangling that from in front of my audience. Just give a couple of characters a scene here or there that gives them pause and makes them wonder, like, I wonder if there could be more there if they just had the right opportunity.
And I think that is something to think about, especially when it comes to queer ships, and especially when it comes to things written in like the Tolkien-ish era. Is like queer love just wasn't really openly talked about, much less written about, and
hmm
I think that that's maybe something to keep in mind. Like maybe Tolkien would have done that if he lived in the modern era, was writing this like now. Potentially, that could have happened. So I think that that's also something that people, as a queer person looking for representation, I'm very familiar with like trying to find the crumbs in the in the larger
hmm
meal that look like it could be queer. So I think that's part of
hmm
this, is maybe that's like people like me looking for the ships in it. But then also I think it just could be that Tolkien didn't feel comfortable writing this, and you really never know what it could be, you know?
hmm I do agree with you. There is an aspect of being an artist where you create art and you put it out into the world. And after you've done that, you can't really control how it's perceived and where it goes. It's sort of grown beyond you. He is gone, but his work survives, and it's up to, people who get receive that to interpret it. Um, Kind of losing my train of thought here a little bit, but I think that it's a lot of fun to play with that and to ask the what ifs
And
and to maybe put representation where it might have been if it had been born, or created in a different era. Yeah.
and I also feel like there's nothing wrong with putting representation where it's not. You know what I'm saying?
hmm
I think there's nothing wrong with like even if the writer didn't intend to put this thing there, if there's enough evidence to suggest that it could be true, I don't think there's anything wrong
Hmm.
with a reader or a viewer to say, well, I see it there. That's how I interpret it.
Yes,
And that's like
I
what
ship
Matt,
that.
and I think that's fine, you know?
Hmm. Hmm. Yes. I think in particular, the Lord of the Rings series is just such a really good example of that, of having um these characters, because I mean there were truly not a lot of female characters in this series. We were not given a lot of them, but in his series in particular, the heroes cry and they sing and they dance and they're bonded and they care about each other and they are there for each other in battle. And um there's the triangle of love. It's commitment, it's intimacy, and it's passion. And we get lots and lots of that intimacy, we get lots and lots of that commitment. The only missing component is like passion. um but when you see them interacting and staring at each other, it's so lovingly, it's so easy to see it that, if this is a more closed doors sort of romance,
Well,
or a longing, a pining that they don't feel comfortable expressing.
and I do think that Sam does have some lines towards the end. Like whenever Frodo is like he can no longer carry the ring himself, and like he can barely move, and Sam has to like carry him. And there's lines
Hmm.
in that moment that I think do feel passionate. That do feel like he's sort of like expressing, some sort of passion or attraction or something towards Frodo.
Yeah. Now, canonically, Samwise has a girl back home, Rosie Cotton, that he talks about at the end and everything. Um, I'm kind of a mindset that it's okay to love more than one person and that you're going to feel different sorts of loves for different people. And I don't think that you necessarily have to have a severely physical relationship with someone to truly love them. So that's my 2 cents there. Um, but when you look at love, would you go to the ends of the earth for this person? Absolutely, and he did.
Well, and I think too when you look at when you think about different kinds of relationships, right? And we always
Mhm.
say that fantasy. I don't necessarily feel this way about it, but I think that a lot of people feel like fantasy is sort of like this like medieval, like Middle Ages kind of thing. So when you think about like ancient Greece or like that time period, like a lot of people were married and had relationships with their wives at home, but then also had relationships with men whenever they left their home. Like that was
Mhm.
not unusual in that time. So I don't think it's outside their realm to say that that sort of thing could have existed in a Lord of the Rings like setting. And also, for the record, Tolkien was a military guy. Like he traveled, for the war. Uh, Plenty of stories about men being away from their wives and trying to find companionship. So like,
Yes.
what is the fellowship of the ring, like the journey with the ring, if it's not, like traveling for war essentially?
Yes, you get that same camaraderie for sure. Yes. Um, yeah, yeah, people are horny. People like to. I
Well, and it's
think, of course, there's a spectrum, but like a lot of us like to wonder what would happen if you're alone with a different, away from your loved ones for long enough. How long does it take you to crack?
well, and
Um,
also like I think with Frodo and Sam, I think that something you could say in their dialogue is that they don't seem wildly horny. If that sounds, you know what I'm saying? They seem like they're maybe a little bit like I think they are not aromantic, but I think they might be a bit asexual, like somewhere on the spectrum, where they're not like super super into like the sexual love, but they seem to deeply love one another. So like that's the other thing I think that it's hard to parse when you look at these sort of relationships is like maybe they were in love with each other, maybe they were essentially a couple, but just sex wasn't part of it, and I don't think that's wrong either.
mhm. Well, I mean, there's things like, is it appropriate for the genre? Is it appropriate for the readership that you're, writing for? Um, Obviously, he wouldn't have put anything like that in his novels. Um, but again, it's just that little seed of like, what if this was implied? You know,
I've never thought about it, but The Hobbit, he like was marketed as a children's book, correct? Like The Hobbit was more of like a
mhm,
children's book. Was Lord of
yes,
the Rings in its time marketed as a children's book, or was it marketed as like epic fantasy? That I don't
I
know.
believe it was written for adults.
Okay.
Yeah, The Hobbit began as a story that he was telling his son at night, and his son kept catching inconsistencies. And he's like, "Oh no, last time you said this, and now it's this." So he started writing the story down to keep it consistent, and it turned into a full novel. Um, Whereas Lord of the Rings, like had a whole universe to it, like side books and things like that. Yeah, I don't think that he would have written anything like that there, even if it was in his mind that it was.
Because I think you're right. Like I think there are people that write to tropes, and like God bless them. Like I love the idea of actually
Oh,
writing things that people in the
absolutely.
market want to do, but I've never thought about it that way.
Absolutely, and it's a bit of a choice to pick a trope and sort of write a book around it, writing to market, figuring out what's hot, and putting more of that out there because you'd like to get paid. That's a very
Yeah.
real choice, and it's a legitimate one. And I think that there's nothing wrong with writing a story that people want, and that they'll love.
And also, I think we know this as creative. Sometimes putting yourself in a box makes it a lot easier to write the thing you're doing
Mhm.
because you have boundaries. You know what I mean? Like
Oh yes,
you have
yes.
things you can't go outside of, which makes it a little easier to control yourself.
Mhm. I mean, like if you look at Hallmark Christmas movies, they're very highly formulaic. They're very you know exactly sort of what's going to happen, maybe a couple surprises, but not really. And they're pretty much they're very similar. But heck, if you don't watch five every single year, like we love them, we can't get enough of them. A lot of rom coms, they follow very particular formulas. We kind of can anticipate what's happening, but we love them.
And I think
And
honestly, to get it
yeah.
back to topic, this is going to be
Yes.
impressive. Like, hang on here. Uh, I think that honestly, when you think about whenever Tolkien wrote Lord of the Rings, fantasy really because now we think of like adventure, fantasy, sci-fi as like there's always a love story at the center of it because like that's sort of like how the formula works now. It wasn't that way back then. Like it wasn't. There always was a
Yes.
love interest. It's like we did have the Aragorn Arwen thing that kind of was in the background, but like it wasn't always center stage in those kinds of books. And I think that maybe because he was writing that genre, he didn't feel like a love story would have made sense between the primary characters.
Mm. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Yes, older romance was very definitely in the background. And yeah, there does seem to be a great divide in fantasy where like you have the fantasy that is only adventure, only action, only thing like no romance at all. And then you have the fantasy where there is a very strong romantic plot. Um,
And the and
I
the two shall
particularly
never touch,
enjoy.
essentially, often.
Yeah, yeah. I kind of ride the line a little bit there where my books do have romance, but they are like a subplot rather than the plot,
Part of me feels
which
like
makes my
what
book really hard to market.
yeah. No, part of me feels like what we do, and I think that honestly a lot of modern, especially a lot of modern indie writers, is
Hmm.
we basically do what people do when they ship characters is we write our books and then we want these characters to kiss and then they just do because we want them to. We just let it happen.
Hmm. And then we have to let it all go horribly wrong for the
Yeah,
drama.
for sure. So Kirsha, thank you so much for joining me. Where can people find out more about your books? What are your books? People know where to find you.
I'm on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. I have a Facebook group called Deception and Justice Books. And I'm Kirsha Fox everywhere. And most of my books can be found on Amazon.
And one of them just came out a bit ago, right? Like a few months ago.
Yes. Yes, just a few days ago. It's called Keeper of the Demon School. It is number 3 in my series. It's really exciting. I've added a bunch of new point of views and, just everything is getting out of control twisty.
And we love to see
You
it.
know, like the plot thickens, the plot thickens. The stakes have never been higher. The first book was like cute and fluffy little mission. Okay, we're gonna do this. And like number two, like everything is just like, oh man, this really sucks. And the third book, like everything is imploding because everything has to get darker before it can get lighter, right? It's like that dark middle point. So it's definitely the most like it has levity, of course, you got to do that, but it's definitely a little bit more grimmer than the first book was. But I'm really excited to write the conclusion next.
I'm excited for your readers to check all this out. It sounds amazing. So thanks so much for
Thank
joining
you.
me. Thanks so much for watching this, guys, for this episode of I Ship It. Watch it next time where I talk to somebody else about the characters we ship together and probably fully unrelated things as well. See you next time.